Ric Flair is a name that needs no introduction. Whether you're a lifelong wrestling fan or someone who's just seen the memes and heard the woo, chances are you know something about the Nature Boy. He was loud, flashy, emotional, dramatic, and above all, unforgettable. With a career spanning over 40 years, 16 world titles, and a legacy that touched every corner of the wrestling world, Flair became larger than life. But for all the cheers, the robes, and the championship gold, Flair's journey wasn't just filled with admiration. In fact, behind the curtain, many of his peers had serious problems with him. Some felt disrespected, others felt betrayed, and a few genuinely hated him. It's easy to look at Ric Flair as a legend, but the truth is, he was human, flawed, stubborn, outspoken, and at times incredibly difficult to work with. Over the years, his actions, opinions, and larger-than-life ego created real tension with some of the biggest names in the business. In this story, we're not just talking about fake wrestling rivalries. These were personal. Let's take a look at 6 wrestlers who had real-life heat with Ric Flair, and why it ran so deep. 1. Vince McMahon, age 80, a broken trust between two titans. The relationship between Vince McMahon and Ric Flair has always been layered, complicated, and at times, downright volatile. When Flair left WCW and joined WWE in the early 1990s, it was Vince McMahon who gave him a massive platform to shine. The Nature Boy came in with his iconic persona intact, instantly standing out with his flashy robes, wild promos, and veteran ring psychology. Initially, Vince treated Flair like royalty, giving him top-level feuds with the likes of Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, and others. However, behind the curtain, cracks slowly started to appear. Flair has often spoken about feeling creatively restricted in WWE. He claimed that Vince would bring him in during certain eras only to use him for a specific purpose, and then sideline him once that purpose was served. According to Flair, Vince would sometimes exploit his name and legacy, but never give him full creative control or long-term respect as a veteran. The most significant fallout came years later, especially around 2021 to 2022, when Flair began to speak more openly in interviews. In one emotional podcast, Flair said Vince mentally broke him on several occasions, claiming he was left feeling disrespected and discarded after dedicating so much of his life to the business. In 2022, things reached a boiling point when Flair revealed that Vince had betrayed his trust on a personal level. Though he didn't elaborate fully, it was believed to be linked to the controversy surrounding Flair during the Plane Ride from Hell episode of Dark Side of the Ring, after which WWE distanced itself from him. Flair admitted, "I thought we were closer. I gave everything to that man. And then I got a phone call that changed everything." Their relationship remains icy. Despite their deep history together, it appears that both men now see each other more as business associates of the past than true friends of the present. 2. Sting, age 66. From WCW allies to silent tension, Ric Flair and Sting are two names that defined WCW in the late 80s and early 90s. Their matches were legendary. The visual of a young, energetic Sting standing toe-to-toe with the stylin', profilin' Ric Flair is etched in wrestling history. Their 1988 Clash of the Champions match, a 45-minute draw, was career-defining for Sting and cemented Flair as a top-tier ring general. From the outside, fans assumed the two had a great working relationship, but behind the scenes, things weren't always as respectful as they seemed. According to various shoot interviews, Sting felt that Flair often used his seniority and political power backstage to control the narrative, both in terms of booking and influence. While Sting was positioned as WCW's Golden Boy, Flair was the heart of the NWA Old Guard, and he didn't always welcome change. Sting once stated in an interview, "Flair was the man, no doubt, but he liked being the man. And when younger guys started getting over, It felt like he didn't want to pass the torch completely. The real tension seemed to come not from one explosive incident, but from years of subtle power plays. Flair, in turn, has made backhanded comments over the years, calling Sting a great performer, but not a locker room leader, implying that Sting lacked the edge and toughness needed to truly lead a wrestling company. Even during Sting's short run in WWE, Flair reportedly didn't reach out or support him publicly, which surprised many considering their history. It's not outright hatred, but there's definitely a long-standing undercurrent of distrust and philosophical difference between the two. 3. John Cena, age 48. Legacy, records, and quiet disrespect. On the surface, Ric Flair and John Cena have always had a cordial, almost mentor-student relationship, especially as Cena rose to main event status in the 2000s. Flair was one of the few legends who openly praised Cena's work ethic and leadership in public. But as is often the case in wrestling, the story behind the scenes is much more complicated. For years, Ric Flair proudly touted his record of 16 world championships, a number so iconic that it became part of his identity. As Cena approached that milestone, the question became, would WWE allow Cena to break the record? While Flair publicly said he'd be honored if Cena matched or surpassed him, privately he wasn't thrilled. Flair has hinted in multiple interviews that he didn't feel Cena truly respected his legacy. According to Flair, when I won titles, they meant something different. There were territories. There was competition. You had to fight for your spot. Today, it's a different game. Flair also expressed disappointment that Cena didn't adopt any of the Flair-style theatrics or pay tribute to the old-school wrestling psychology Flair championed. He felt Cena treated the business more like a corporate responsibility than a passionate art form. Things further deteriorated when Cena appeared to distance himself from Flair's personal controversies, including Flair's legal troubles and public scandals. During the plane ride from Hell Backlash, Cena chose to remain silent rather than defend Flair, which the Nature Boy reportedly took as a personal betrayal. In Flair's own words, he could have picked up the phone. That's all I'll say. Despite the smiles on camera, it seems that Cena and Flair's relationship was always more PR-driven than heartfelt. And underneath that surface, real resentment brewed. 4. Edge, age, 51, rated R, ego versus the Nature Boy's legacy. Edge, the rated R superstar, made his name during WWE's ruthless aggression era, thriving on controversy, charisma, and a fearlessness that made him one of the most decorated champions in the company's history. But for all his accolades, there was always one legend who seemed less than impressed: Ric Flair. Their issues weren't just fictional or scripted. In his autobiography, Adam Copeland on Edge, Edge wrote about the subtle tension he felt with Ric Flair early in his career. According to him, Flair often gave off an energy that made younger stars feel like they hadn't earned their spot yet. And Edge, being part of a generation that exploded in the post-Attitude Era, felt this ego clash constantly. The turning point came in 2006, when Edge and Ric Flair were thrown into a real-life heated promo segment that blurred the lines between kayfabe and reality. The segment was supposed to be part of their storyline feud, but both men reportedly went off script, trading jabs that felt more personal than professional. Flair accused Edge of disrespecting the business, while Edge clapped back with comments questioning Flair's behavior outside the ring. Behind the scenes, things were no better. Flair, who was navigating a tumultuous personal life at the time, often made comments dismissing Edge's rise. He allegedly called Edge overrated in casual conversations with other veterans, and said his success came more from shock value than wrestling skill. The rated R character, known for his relationship with Lita and edgy storylines, was something Flair openly disapproved of. Edge was trying to make noise, Flair said in a later interview, but that kind of heat doesn't last. There's a difference between cheap heat and lasting greatness. Edge, on the other hand, felt that Flair was jealous of the spotlight moving on, and couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Though both men eventually seemed to cool off the tension in public appearances, the respect never fully felt mutual. The heat may not have exploded into a full-blown feud, but it lingered like smoke after a fire. 5. Seth Rollins, age 39, a clash of generations and leadership styles. Seth Rollins has carved out a unique identity for himself in WWE, from his Shield days to becoming the Architect, the Visionary, and even the Messiah. But one title Ric Flair was never willing to hand him was the future of WWE. The animosity between Flair and Rollins became public in the late 2000s. Rollins, known for his candid opinions, began referring to some aspects of wrestling's past, including Flair's era, as outdated. He emphasized that today's audience connected differently, and that modern stars like himself and Roman Reigns were leading the industry in a new direction. Flair didn't take kindly to that. In multiple podcast appearances, Flair mocked Rollins' title Reigns, calling them underwhelming, and saying Rollins lacked the it factor required to carry WWE on his back the way stars like Cena, Rock, or even Roman Reigns had. In one of his most scathing remarks, Flair said, "Rollins is no leader. He's not the guy. He's just a guy. Roman is the man now. And Seth should stop pretending otherwise." That line spread quickly online, and Rollins didn't stay quiet. He responded during interviews and social media by suggesting Flair was stuck in the past and couldn't accept the changing face of the business. At one point, Rollins said, "I have all the respect in the world for Ric Flair as a performer, but the business moves on. We can't live in 1985 forever." Their back and forth eventually spilled onto Twitter, where fans noticed subtle jabs, likes, and untagged shade thrown across platforms. Many believe Rollins' refusal to emulate the traditional wrestling style and his more modern approach to promos and character work rubbed Flair the wrong way. To Flair, wrestling was sacred and structured. To Rollins, it was adaptive, ever-changing, and open to interpretation. It's not just a generational gap. It's a philosophical war on what wrestling should be. 6. Triple H, age 56. From protege to estranged ally. This might be the most heartbreaking fallout of all. Triple H and Ric Flair were once inseparable on-screen and off. As part of Evolution, Flair played the mentor, the grizzled veteran guiding rising stars. Triple H, Randy Orton, and Batista. Their chemistry was electric. Flair called Triple H the son I never had in interviews, and credited him with helping him regain confidence during a low point in his life. But somewhere along the way, the admiration turned into bitterness. After Evolution disbanded and Triple H moved into corporate power, their dynamic shifted. Flair often felt like he was being pushed aside, both creatively and emotionally. Despite Flair's countless contributions to WWE, he felt he was no longer needed once Triple H took over more responsibility behind the scenes. In later interviews and on his podcast To Be the Man, Flair spoke candidly about his disappointment. Triple H used me when he needed the legend rub. But when it came time to be there for me later, when I was down, he vanished. One of Flair's most stinging quotes came in 2021 when he said, "Hunter forgot who helped him look like a god in that ring." The situation got worse when Flair expected more involvement in WWE creative or mentorship roles, but wasn't brought on. He believed Triple H, of all people, would fight for him. But instead, Flair felt abandoned. This resentment intensified after Flair's WWE departure, where many believed HHH could have intervened or offered a role to keep him engaged. Instead, Rick was left feeling like yesterday's news in a company he helped build. Despite this, Triple H has rarely spoken publicly against Flair. In fact, during interviews, he still calls Rick a legend and a key part of his career. But Flair has made it clear that he sees Triple H's silence and distance as a form of betrayal, one that cut deeper than most. The complex legacy of the Nature Boy, Ric Flair's career is nothing short of iconic. A 16-time world champion, a cultural phenomenon, and a symbol of wrestling greatness. But for every robe he wore and every woo that echoed through arenas, there are just as many real-life stories of conflict, ego clashes, and broken relationships. As we've explored, several top WWE stars, Vince McMahon, Sting, John Cena, Edge, Seth Rollins, and even his once close ally Triple H, have all had legitimate grievances with Flair. These aren't just storyline rivalries or scripted tensions. They're rooted in personal betrayal, philosophical differences, generational divides, and moments where respect gave way to resentment. Flair's larger-than-life persona often demanded the spotlight, and that, combined with his outspoken nature, rubbed many the wrong way. Some saw him as a mentor, others as a manipulator. To a few, he was a legend who never knew when to step aside. Yet, that's exactly what makes Ric Flair so compelling. He's never been just one thing. He's both hero and heel, celebrated and criticized, adored and alienated. His legacy is not clean or easy to summarize, but it's real, raw, and unforgettable. In a world of carefully curated personas, Ric Flair lived out loud, flaws and all, and perhaps that's what makes his story timeless.